Dear Ijeawele, or a Feminist Manifesto in 15 Suggestions by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, narrated by Adamu Abdul-Majid. Introduction. When a couple of years ago, a friend of mine from childhood, who had grown into a brilliant, strong, kind woman, asked me to tell her how to raise a baby girl a feminist, my first thought was that I did not know. It felt too huge a task. But I had spoken publicly about feminism, and perhaps that made her feel I was an expert on the subject. I had over the years also helped to care for many babies of loved ones. I had worked as a babysitter and helped raise my nephews and nieces. I had done a lot of watching and listening, and I had done even more thinking. In response to my friend's request, I decided to write her a letter, which I hope will be honest and practical, while also serving as a map of sort for my own feminist thinking. This book is a version of that letter, with some details changed. Now that I too am the mother of a delightful baby girl, I realize how easy it is to dispense advice about raising a child when you're not facing the enormously complex reality of it yourself. Still, I think it is morally urgent to have honest conversations about raising children differently, about trying to create a fairer world for men and women. My friend sends me a reply saying she'll try to follow my suggestions. And in rereading these as a mother, I too am determined to try. Dear Ijeawele, what joy and what lovely names! Chisalom Adiora. She is so beautiful. Only a week old, and she already looks curious about the world. What a magnificent thing you have done, bringing a human being into the world. Congratulations feels too light. Your notes made me cry. You know how I can foolishly get emotional sometimes. Please know that I take your charge, how to raise her feminist, very seriously. And I understand what you mean by not always knowing what a feminist response to situations should be. For me, feminism is always contextual. I don't have a set in tone rule. The closest I have to a formula are my two feminist tools, and I want to share them with you as a starting point. The first is your premise, the solid and bending belief that you start off with. What is your premise? Your feminist premise should be, I matter. I matter equally, not if only, not as long as. I matter equally, full stop. The second tool is a question. Can you reverse X and get the same results? For example, many people believe that a woman's feminist response to a husband's infidelity should be to leave. But I think staying can also be a feminist choice, depending on the context. If Judy sleeps with another woman and you forgive him, would the same be true if you slept with another man? If the answer is yes, then your choosing to forgive him can be a feminist choice because it is not shaped by a gender inequality. Sadly, the reality in most marriages is that the answer to that question will often be no, and the reason will be gender-based, that upset idea of men will be men, which means having a lower standard for men. I have some suggestions for how to raise Chisalom, but remember that you might do all the things I suggest, and she will still turn out to be different from what you hoped, because sometimes life just does its things. What matters is that you try, and always trust your instincts above all else, because you will be guided by your love for your child. Here are my suggestions. First suggestion: be a full person. Motherhood is a glorious gift, but do not define yourself solely by motherhood. Be a full person. Your child will benefit from that. The pioneering American journalist, Marlon Sanders, who was the first woman to report from Vietnam, during the war, and who was the mother of a son, once gave this piece of advice to a younger journalist. Never apologize for working. You love what you do, and loving what you do is a great gift to give your child. I find this to be so wise and moving. You don't have to love your job. You can merely love what your job does for you. The confidence, the self-fulfillment that comes with doing and earning. It doesn't surprise me that your sister-in-law says you should be a traditional mother and stay home, that surely can afford not to have a double income family. People will selectively use tradition to justify anything. Tell her that a double income family is actually the true Igbo tradition, because not only did mothers farm and trade before British colonialism, trading was exclusively done by women in some parts of Igbo land. She will know this if reading books were not such an alien enterprise to her. Okay, that snap was to cheer you up. I know you are annoyed, and you should be, but it is really best to ignore her. Everybody will have an opinion about what you should do, but what matters is what you want for yourself, not what others want you to want. Please reject the idea that motherhood and work are mutually exclusive. Our mothers worked full-time while we were growing up, and we turned out well. At least you did. The jury is still out on me. In these coming weeks of early motherhood, be kind to yourself. Ask for help. Expect to be helped. There is no such thing as a superwoman. Parenting is about practice and love. I do wish, though, that parent had not been turned into a verb, which I think is the root of the global middle class phenomenon of parenting as an endless anxious journey of guilt. Give yourself room to fail. A new mother does not necessarily know how to calm a crying baby. Don't assume that you should know everything. Read books. Look things up on the internet. Ask older parents. Or just use trial and error. But above all, let your focus be on remaining a full person. Take time for yourself. Nurture your own needs. Please do not think of it as doing it all. Our culture celebrates the idea of women who are able to do it all, but don't question the premise of that praise. I have no interest in the debate about women doing it all, because it is a debate that assumes that caregiving and domestic work are singularly female domains, an idea that I strongly reject. Domestic work and caregiving should be gender neutral, and we should be asking not whether a woman can do it all, but how best to support parents in their dual duties at work and at home. Second suggestion: do it together. Remember in primary school we learned that a verb was a doing word? Well, a father is as much a verb as a mother. Shudi should do everything that biology allows, which is everything but breastfeeding. Sometimes mothers, so conditioned to be all and do all, are complicit in diminishing the role of fathers. You might think Chudi would not bath her exactly as you would like, that he might not wipe her bum as perfectly as you do. But so what? What is the worst that can happen? She won't die at the hands of her father. Seriously, he loves her. It's good for her to be cared for by her father. So look away. Arrest your perfectionism. Still your socially conditioned sense of duty. Share childcare equally. Equally, of course, depends on you both. And you will have to work it out, paying equal attention to each person's needs. It does not have to mean a literal 50-50 or a day-by-day scorekeeping. But you will know when the childcare work is equally shared. You will know by the lack of resentment. Because when there is true equality, resentment does not exist. And please reject the language of help. Shudi is not helping you by caring for his child. He is doing what he should. When we say fathers are helping, we are suggesting that childcare is a mother's territory into which fathers valiantly venture. Can you imagine how many more people today would be happier, more stable, better contributors to the world if their fathers had been actively present in their childhood? And never say that Chudi is babysitting. People who babysit are people for whom the child is not a primary responsibility. Chudi does not deserve any special gratitude or praise, nor do you. You both made a choice to bring the child into the world, and the responsibility for that child belongs equally to you both. It would be different if you were a single mother, whether by circumstance or choice, because doing it together would then not be an option. But you should not be a single mother unless you are truly a single mother. My friend Wabu once told me that because his wife left when his kids were young, he became Mr. Mom, by which he meant that he did the daily caregiving. But he was not being a Mr. Mom, he was simply being a dad. Third suggestion: teach her that the idea of gender roles is absolute nonsense. Do not tell her that she should or should not do something because she is a girl. Because you are a girl is never a reason for anything, ever. I remember being told as a child to bend down properly while sweeping, like a girl, which meant that sweeping was about being female. I wish I had been told simply, bend down and sweep properly because you will clean the floor better. I wish my brothers had been told the same thing. There have been recent Nigerian social media debates about women and cooking, about how wives have to cook for husbands. It is funny, in a way that sad things are funny, that we are still talking about cooking as some kind of marriageability test for women. The knowledge of cooking does not come pre-installed in the vagina. Cooking is learned. Cooking, domestic work in general, is a life skill that both men and women should ideally have. It is also a skill that can elude both men and women. We also need to question the idea of marriage as a prize to women, because that is the basis of this absurd debate. If we stop conditioning women to see marriage as a prize, then we will have fewer debates about a woman needing to cook in order to earn that prize. It is interesting to me how early the world starts to invent gender roles. Yesterday I was in a children's shop to buy Chiselum an outfit. In the girls section were pale creations of washed out shades of pink. I disliked them. The boys section had outfits of vibrant shades of blue. Because I thought blue would be adorable against her brown skin and photograph better, I bought one. At the checkout counter, the cashier said mine was a perfect present for the new boy. I said it was for a baby girl. She looked horrified. Blue for a girl? I cannot help but wonder about a clever marketing person who invented the pink-blue binary. There was also a gender-neutral section with its array of bloodless grays. Gender-neutral is silly because it is premised on the idea of male being blue and female being pink, and gender-neutral being its own category. Why not just baby clothing organized by age and displayed in all colors? The bodies of male and female infants are similar after all. I looked at the toys section, which was also arranged by gender. Toys for boys are mostly active and involve some sort of doing. Trains, cars, and toys for girls are mostly passive and are overwhelmingly dolls. I was struck by this. I had not quite realized how early society starts to invent ideas of what a boy should be and what a girl should be. I wish the toys had been arranged by type rather than by gender. Did I ever tell you about going to a US mall with a 7-year-old Nigerian girl and her mother? She saw a toy helicopter, one of those things that fly by wireless remote control, and she was fascinated and asked for one. No, her mother said, you have your dolls. And she responded, "Mommy, is it only dolls I will play with?" I have never forgotten that. Her mother meant well, obviously. She was well versed in the ideas of gender roles, that girls play with dolls and boys with helicopters. I wonder now, wistfully, if the girl would have turned out to be a revolutionary engineer had she been given a chance to explore the helicopter. If we don't place the straitjackets of gender roles on young children, we give them space to reach their full potential. Please see Chisalom as an individual, not as a girl who should be a certain way. See her weaknesses and her strengths in an individual way. Do not measure her on a scale of what a girl should be. Measure her on a scale of being the best version of herself. A young Nigerian woman once told me that she had for years behaved like a boy. She liked football and was bored by dresses until her mother forced her to stop her boyish interest. Now, she is grateful to her mother for helping her start behaving like a girl. The story made me sad. I wondered what parts of herself she had needed to silence and stifle, and wondered about what her spirit had lost, because what she called behaving like a boy was simply behaving like herself. Another acquaintance, an American living in the Pacific Northwest, once told me that when she took her 1-year-old son to a baby playground where babies had been brought by their mothers, she noticed that the mothers of baby girls were very restraining, constantly telling girls, "Don't touch," or "Stop and be nice." And she noticed that the baby boys were encouraged to explore more and were not restrained as much and were almost never told to be nice. Her theory was that parents unconsciously start very early to teach girls how to be, that baby girls are given less room and more rules, and baby boys more room and fewer rules. Gender roles are so deeply conditioned in us that we will often follow them, even when they chafe against our true desires, our needs, our happiness. They are very difficult to unlearn, and so it is important to try to make sure that Chisalom rejects them from the beginning. Instead of letting her to internalize the idea of gender roles, tell her that it is important to be able to do for herself and fend for herself. Teach her to try to fix physical things when they break. We are quick to assume that girls can do many things. Let her try. She might not fully succeed, but let her try. Buy her toys like blocks and trains, and dolls too, if you want to. Fourth suggestion: beware the danger of what I call feminism light. It is the idea of conditional female equality. Please reject this entirely. It is a hollow, appeasing, and bankrupt idea. Being a feminist is like being pregnant. You either are or you are not. You either believe in full equality of men and women or you do not. Feminism light uses analogies like he is the head and you are the neck, or he is driving but you are in the front seat. More troubling is the idea in feminism light that men are naturally superior but should be expected to treat women well. No, no, no. There must be more than male benevolence as the basis for a woman's well being. Feminism light uses the language of allowing. Theresa May is the British Prime Minister, and here is how a progressive British newspaper described her husband. Philip May is known in politics as a man who had taken a back seat and allowed his wife, Theresa, to shine. Allowed. Now, let us reverse it. Theresa May has allowed her husband to shine. Does it make sense? If Philip May were Prime Minister, perhaps we might hear that his wife had supported him from the background, or that she was behind him, or that she had stood by his side. But we will never hear that she had allowed him to shine. Allow is a troubling word. Allow is about power. You will often hear members of the Nigerian chapter of the Society of Feminism Life say, "Leave the woman alone to do what she wants as long as her husband allows." A husband is not a headmaster. A wife is not a schoolgirl. Permission and being allowed, when used one-sidedly, and it is nearly only used that way, should never be the language of an equal marriage. Another egregious example of feminism light, men who say, "Of course, a wife does not always do the domestic work. I did domestic work when my wife traveled." Do you remember how we laughed and laughed at the atrociously written piece about me some years ago? The writer had accused me of being angry, as though being angry was something to be ashamed of. Of course I am angry. I am angry about racism. I am angry about sexism. But I recently came to the realization that I am angrier about sexism than I am about racism. Because in my anger about sexism, I often feel lonely. Because I love and live among many people who easily acknowledge race injustice but not gender injustice. I cannot tell you how often people I care about, men and women, have expected me to make a case for sexism, to prove it, as it were, while never having the same expectation for racism. Obviously, in the wider world, too many people are still expected to prove racism, but not in my close circle. I cannot tell you how often people I care about have dismissed or diminished sexist situations. Like our friend Ikenga, always quick to deny that anything is caused by misogyny, never interested in listening or engaging, always eager to explain how it is in fact women who are privileged. He once said, "Even though the general idea is that my father is in charge of our home, it's my mother who is really in charge behind the scenes." He thought he was refuting sexism, but he was making my case. Why behind the scene? If a woman has power, then why do we need to disguise that she has power? But here is a sad truth. Our world is full of men and women who do not like powerful women. We have been so conditioned to think of power as male that a powerful woman is an aberration, and so she is policed. We often ask of powerful women, is she humble? Does she smile? Is she grateful enough? Does she have a domestic side? Questions we do not ask of powerful men, which shows that our discomfort is not with power itself, but with women. We judge powerful women more harshly than we judge powerful men, and feminism lies enables this. Fifth suggestion: teach Chisalom to read. Teach her to love books. The best way is by casual example. If she sees you reading, she will understand that reading is valuable. If she were not to go to school and merely just read books, she will arguably become more knowledgeable than a conventionally educated child. Books will help her understand and question the world, help her express herself, and help her in whatever she wants to become. A chef, a scientist, a singer, all benefit from the skills that reading brings. I do not mean school books. I mean books that have nothing to do with school. Autobiographies and novels and histories. If all else fails, pay her to read. Reward her. I know this remarkable Nigerian woman, Angela, a single mother who was raising her child in the United States. Her child did not take to reading, so she decided to pay her 5 cents per page. An expensive endeavor, she later joked, but a worthy investment. Sixth suggestion: teach her to question language. Language is the repository of our prejudices, our beliefs, our assumptions. But to teach her that, you will have to question your own language. A friend of mine says she will never call her daughter princess. People mean well when they say this, but princess is loaded with assumptions of a girl's delicacy, of the prince who will come to save her, etc. This friend prefers angel and star. So decide for yourself the things you will say to your child, because what you say to your child matters. It teaches her what she should value. You know that Igbo joke used to tease girls who are being childish. What are you doing? Don't you know you're old enough to find a husband? I used to say that often, but now I choose not to. I say, you are old enough to find a job, because I do not believe that marriage is something we should teach young girls to aspire to. Try not to use words like misogyny or patriarchy too often with Chisalom. We feminists can sometimes be too jargony, and jargons can sometimes feel too abstract. Don't just label something misogynistic. Tell her why it is, and tell her what will make it not be. Teach her that if you criticize X in women, but do not criticize X in men, then you do not have a problem with X. You have a problem with women. For X, please insert words like anger, ambition, loudness, stubbornness, coldness, ruthlessness. Teach her to ask questions like, what are the things that women cannot do because they are women? Do these things have cultural prestige? If so, why are only men allowed to do things that have cultural prestige? It is helpful, I think, to use everyday examples. Remember that television commercial we watched in Lagos, where a man cooks and his wife claps for him? True progress is when she doesn't clap for him, but just reacts to the food itself. She can either praise the food or not praise the food, just as he can praise hers or not praise hers. But what is sexist is that she is praising the fact that he has undertaken the act of cooking. Praise that implies that cooking is an inherently female act. Remember the mechanic in Lagos who was described as a lady mechanic in a newspaper profile? Teach Chisalom that a woman is a mechanic, not a lady mechanic. Point out to her how wrong it is that a man who hits your car in Lagos traffic gets out and tells you to go and bring your husband because he can't deal with a woman. Instead of merely telling her, show her with examples that misogyny can be overt and misogyny can be subtle, and that both are abhorrent. Teach her to question men who can have empathy for women only if they see them as relational rather than as individual equal humans. Men who, when discussing rape, will always say something like, if it were my daughter, or wife, or sister. Yet, such men do not need to imagine a male victim of crime as a brother or son in order to feel empathy. Teach her to question the idea of woman as a special species. I once heard an American politician, in his bid to show his support for women, speak of how women should be revered and championed, a sentiment that is all too common. Tell Chisalom that women actually don't need to be championed and revered. They just need to be treated as equal human beings. There is a patronizing undertone in the idea of women needing to be championed or revered because they are women. It makes me think of chivalry, and the premise of chivalry is female weakness.